Everybody, Dr. Pedram back with Dr. Sarah. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Nice to see you, Sarah.
Nice to see you, Pedram. Are we talking GMOs today?
Today's GMO part 1.
Right on.
Yeah, so I know that you've been hanging out with Jeffrey Smith. We had him here, I don't know, maybe about a month ago. He was in my office in Southern California and got to spend a good part of the day with him. It blows my mind. You can read about this stuff, but when you actually stop and think about what the heck is going on with our food and what some companies are doing to just mess with us, you have no choice but to start thinking evil empire. I mean, what's happening here? And it's, you guys, if you've got kids, if you've got an interest to be happy and alive in this world, this is a show for you, because it's pretty gross what's happening with some of these foods and what Franken-food is doing to us. And I know you just got off hanging out with them, so I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, and let's talk about GMOs and your health.
Totally. So I just shared the stage with Jeffrey Smith yesterday. He's the founder of the Institute for Responsible Technology, and he's really led the charge against genetically modified organisms and how they've infiltrated our food system. And Pedram, I want to start off with a confession, actually, because I really felt like I heard a little bit about GMOs. I had a sense they weren't so good for our health, but I also felt like, do we really have enough data showing that they're dangerous? I had this kind of ambivalence about it until I started to look at the data. So I'm really excited to talk about the data tonight. But I just want to start off by saying, I wasn't thinking about this very much until I read a New Yorker article. It was actually an article in February where the article was about Dr. Oz, and one of the digs that this particular reporter took was saying, Dr. Oz had Jeffrey Smith on his show. And Dr. Oz's wife, Lisa, is a huge fan of Jeffrey Smith's, and she's very anti-GMO. And this reporter just, crucified Jeffrey Smith, saying that he's not a scientist and what he's talking about is all hype. And I just want to sort of separate the truth from fiction today. So I thought we could do that. And I want to start off just by talking about how GMOs really became part of our food system on a large scale in 1996. In 1996 was a major tipping point because that's when we had a gigantic rise in the obesity epidemic, a gigantic rise in the diabetes or diabesity epidemic, as Mark Hyman puts it, an increase in liver disease, more liver cancer, more thyroid cancer. All of these things started to happen. And oh, by the way, there are all these animal studies connecting those conditions to genetically modified food. So I thought we could dig in and maybe start with some of these kind of basic building blocks of what GMOs do to your body so that we can make this really practical. How does that sound?
You know what? Perfect. Because what a lot of the people I talk to, they say, listen, corn is corn. I don't understand the difference. If they've adapted it to grow better and be more robust, then what's the problem? And I think the first place we need to dig into is differentiating GMO food from real food in terms of what's happening with this food and how our bodies are recognizing it as really friend or foe.
Yes. Well, that's a huge one. And, here's what we know about these genetically modified foods. Basically you take a gene from one plant and you introduce it to the genome of another plant. And when you do that, you can introduce a lot of different things, such as the Bt-toxin. That's a major part of genetically modified food. Another example is Roundup. Roundup is an herbicide that's used very broadly. Like, it's amazing how something like 90% of the US population and Canadian population has been exposed to Roundup. And Roundup has a major toxin called glyphosate. And glyphosate has been known to change more than 400 genes in rats. Many of the genes are related to insulin. So I'm hormone girl, and I like to talk about the hormones, but insulin is such an important one. It's in charge when you eat some food. I just ate some chicken and some kale for lunch. When you eat food, insulin's in charge of whether you use that as fuel or you store it as fat. We have an obesity epidemic. And so what we know when it comes to Roundup, for instance, is that it turns on your fat genes and it turns off your skinny genes. So that's kind of a basic way that these genetically modified foods change your biology.
It's interesting that, okay, so people say, well, I don't use Roundup around my house. It's like it doesn't matter. Your farmer is buying it by the ton. And what happens with this Roundup stuff is that it's been engineered to basically kill everything except the plant that it's been programmed to avoid. So if you have a corn stalk, they're going to drop a bomb of this stuff all over it. The corn survives. Everything else is decimated for miles and miles and miles. And so what does that do? Okay, it helps us keep growing corn and not all this other life which we don't want around us, kind of thing. And it's worked well in that capacity, but it's so short-sighted because when you start looking at what it's doing to the soil and the glyphosate and all these other things that we're just starting to become aware of, people are screaming at the top of their lungs saying, stop the presses. And there's, obviously, Monsanto doesn't really have very many fans anymore, but they unfortunately, they got a lot more money than fans. And so you get companies like this that are just pushing this agenda because it's a monopoly, right? It's like, hey man, this is a great product. We're selling it we're selling it by the ton, and the farmers are stuck because, the pesticide and the seeds work hand in hand. So we have this key and lock mechanism where you can't really be, taking seeds of your own, planting them and growing food like our ancestors have done from time immemorial. Now you got to buy our product every season, right? And
that's right. And so you're exactly right. I mean, what we know with Roundup, for instance, I'll just mention one study because I'm a total nerd and I love to talk about the data. So there's one study, a French study, that showed when you feed rats fed Roundup for 2 years, and you compare them to rats that are fed their normal feed, not containing genetically modified organisms, they found a number of striking differences between these two rats. And if you're saying to yourself, I'm not a rat, what is she talking about? Well, it turns out that like 90% of our DNA is the same as rats. Mm-hmm. Some of us are a little closer to rats than others. But when it comes to these rats, those who were exposed to Roundup had major liver toxicity, like 3 to 6-fold compared to the control rats. They had longevity that really suffered. In fact, they died at 2 to 3 times the rate of rats that were not fed GMO foods. They had a problem with their hypothalamus and their pituitary. So their pituitary became disabled. And remember, the pituitary is like NASA. It's responsible for all the hormones in the body. It's really important. And rat brains are especially similar to human brains. Our nervous systems are very similar. There was also problems with reproduction. So fertility was decreased among these rats. So on and on and on. There were so many differences between these particular rats and the rats that were control rats. Now, there's been a lot of controversy about this particular study. And there's been kind of this outcry in the scientific literature, and people have been crucifying this particular scientist who's French for some of his methods. But I say this is where we've got to apply the precautionary principle, and we just have to assume guilty until proven innocent. We have enough evidence of harm to say we should not be exposed to these foods. At the very least, they should be labeled.
Mm-hmm. And we had an initiative in California which went down, which is really sad, in terms of what has been happening in terms of legislation. There was so much misinformation, and the industries really pushed hard and went after people, trying to tell them that this initiative isn't going to be good for them. But we had a GMO labeling initiative, which was just going to say, hey, look, these foods are GMO. We're not saying don't eat them, but we're trying to inform the consumer. And so now we're going back, and there's a real tipping point, and I think a lot of the Institute for Responsible Technology and a lot of these guys that have been really just rolling this boulder uphill for years are starting to gain the momentum. And what's happening is the industry is starting to say, people aren't buying our products if they're GMO. And so there's this huge rush for people to run out there and try to go get non-GMO sourced food. And guess what? There's not that much of it. And so it's creating this market shortage, and it's creating this, in my opinion, it's a good thing, because, it's basic capitalism and economics and supply and demand. So now, starting next planting season, all these farmers are going, screw you, I'm going non-GMO, because people aren't buying GMO anymore. So it's starting to turn it. But, I want to be very precautionary in saying, look, I'm super stoked on the good news about all that, but these industry people don't go down without a fight.
Oh, yes.
And so there's a lot there. So I think you guys, real quick, just so you guys know, there's 6 major crops, okay, in the United States, or just basically anywhere, that are GMO crops. They are soy, corn, canola, cotton, sugar beets, and alfalfa. You're like, well, I don't eat alfalfa. Yeah, but the animals that you eat are fed alfalfa, right? I don't eat soy. You know what? Most of the animals that you eat, or chickens in particular, given soy as part of their vegetarian feed. So it becomes really important to start looking at this stuff. Corn, obvious, it's in everything. Right now, I have an admission to make as well. Jeffrey was down here about a month ago, and the guy looked like he was about to fall over. I mean, he is a hard-working dude.
He is.
He's charging. He's constantly trying to just get out there and get the message out there. And by the time he got to us for our video shoot, the guy looked like he was going to fall over. So we go to location. I stop at a gas station, get some bottles of water, and I go, okay, what can I get this guy? He's the GMO guy, right? So I go get a bag of trail mix, right? And I bring it in. He looks at the label and he goes, I can't eat this. It's got canola in it. I go, what?
Yeah.
Why is there canola oil in trail mix? Right? And it was one of these things where I had to stop myself, and I consider myself a relatively intelligent human being, and it didn't even occur to me that there would be GMO stuff inside of a bag of nuts. Right?
Yes.
And so it was one of these things where I had to stop and be like, oh my God, you got to read every label, because this stuff is just snuck in everywhere. Right? It was a real kind of aha for me. You can't fall asleep. You can't snooze.
Yeah, going organic is one way to avoid the GMO foods. That's not the solution for the inner city, because they don't even have a grocery store where they can buy organic. So we've got to kind of start somewhere. And we do know that the fastest growing niche in the food industry is non-GMO food. So hooray for that. Mm-hmm. You're right. Prop 37 got defeated in California, even though 89% of the nation is in favor of labeling GMO foods. Big Food came into California, the Grocer Association, and they spent $45 million defeating this proposition. Fortunately, word got out, and there's a few other states that have now approved labeling, so thank goodness for that. But, Europe decided a long time ago that they were not going to allow GMO foods come into their continent, in part because of some research that was done showing that animals that are fed GMO foods have more leaky gut. They, if you look at their stomachs after they're fed this food, the stomachs have hypertrophy. They have this hyper replication of the cells, kind of precancerous. And then the intestines, where we're supposed to be absorbing all the nutrients from our lovely food that we eat, had lots of gaps. They had leaky gut. So that was what led to Europe saying, no, we're not going to do this kind of food. And here in the U.S., we're just a lot slower to look at the data and say, you know what, this is harmful for the public. We can't do this. Yeah. But I can tell you, Pedram, the practical thing to me is stop eating GMO foods. That's my prescription. Yeah. No GMO foods.
Yeah. It's, people say, well, that's really hard. And you say, well, what's even harder is taking all of the energy that you produce every single day around an inflammatory, leaky gut, ramping up your immune system to fight yourself, developing autoimmunity problems, and not absorbing your food to create energy, and going into this downward spiral of just feeling like crap. What's harder? Living your life with no energy, or just paying a little attention at the grocery store? It's simple math, but people don't do it because they're so used to just mindlessly, just putting food in their mouth. And that's, I was a monk for 4 years. I've spent a lot of time, with my mouth shut, right? And so a lot of the rituals we had around food and eating was about understanding what we're doing in the process of ingesting, and this is what I am going to become, right? So you are what you eat. Are you going to become this chemically induced Franken-food that's killing your insides, and you're just doing it because you didn't have time to think? Or is it important enough to do it? Now, that being said, we're busy, okay? So here is the non-GMO, let's see, can I get that in there? Yes, the non-GMO shopping guide that the Institute for Responsible Technology has put together. We'll put links on it on all of our stuff as we put this out. These guys have an app. They got a bunch of stuff that they've developed so that it makes it easier for you guys to make informed decisions and figure out what is and what is not GMO. And it's really not that hard, you guys. There's plenty of good food, whole foods that you can eat. There are organic non-GMO varieties of corn. If you say, oh my God, I can't, I grew up on corn on the cob. Right, fine. So you could find an organic strain and go for it. But the point is to understand that there's whole companies that have said, we're throwing the gauntlet. We're not going to do this. We're keeping this out of our food. And eventually it's going to happen in the supply chain where, when Walmart realizes that they're losing money because people don't want GMO, and Walmart tells the companies that they won't stock any more GMO food. Walmart, we're talking to you, right? Walmart, pay attention, right? You want to pretend you're green, or you want to do it for real, right? And this is what it is. It's the consumer driving the companies to do the right thing, and then the companies will say, "Oh my God, Walmart's our biggest buyer. We can't sell to Walmart if we put this crap in our foods. Oh, we're going to pull it out." They're not going to do it for your health because it's cheaper for them to produce the GMO stuff, right? But they'll do it because it's hitting them in the pocketbook. And who's going to hit them in the pocketbook? You, people, everyone out there listening to this. When you choose non-GMO foods, what you're doing is you're choosing the foods that are going to edge out this bad guy business of food leading to crazy medicine and all the things. I mean, there's an epidemic of problems, health problems in this country, in the Western world, for various reasons. But this country just did this in '96, as you illustrated, and the one-to-one correlation is right when they started introducing genetically modified stuff. And I want to be really clear about something. It's not just saying, oh, we took 3 strains of corn and found the strongest one and that became part of it. I mean, we got spider DNA getting mixed in with carrots and corn and whatever else, a goat, to trying to get. These guys are doing crazy stuff in the labs. If you guys knew what they were doing in the labs, I mean, you would run for the hills. And so that's the part of the story that is not being communicated that I think is really important. There's no governors on this science.
That's right. And the FDA is a former general counsel for the head of the FDA. I mean, there's so many issues here in terms of no one protecting us. And so this is one of those situations where we really need to step up. And, when you get 100 scientists together, it's really hard to have consensus. They say things like, I think there's evidence that maybe it's a little bit cold today. There's sort of this lack of being able to make a statement about something that really requires common sense once you look at the literature. And I think it might be helpful just to recap some of these main findings that we've had from the GMO studies, just to kind of really drive this point home. So I mentioned the leaky gut, and that's especially a problem for children. It's a problem for adults too, but we know that this is part of the autistic spectrum, the autism spectrum that we see in this dramatic rise in autism, which, oh, by the way, also increased when GMO crops were introduced in '96. There's also fertility problems, reproductive problems. We know that agricultural workers who are around Roundup have higher rates of pregnancy problems and difficulty getting pregnant. There's the whole issue of diabetes and insulin resistance and how genetically modified organisms change your relationship between insulin and glucose. So I think that's another really important one. There's headaches. There's inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome. So there's, a really broad spectrum here. I just wanted to hit some of the highlights so that people can connect the dots and really understand that food is your best medicine. You don't want your food to contain genetically modified organisms.
Yeah, and if you're a nursing mother, if you're an expecting mother, if you're trying to get pregnant and you're eating GMOs, I mean, boy, are you stacking up the odds against you, right? And so you want to set your system up to not, have to go to these IVF clinics and spend 40 grand trying to get all this stuff done. And there's been such a rise in all of this kind of infertility care. And the question is, how did we become so infertile, right? And so you got to kind of go back, follow the breadcrumbs and say, well, what's changed? Why all of a sudden are girls not being able to get pregnant? right? And so it's a complicated matter, but guys, safety first. And it's not that hard to pull these things out. And the thing is, what blew me away was, we could geek out about this all we want, but Jeffrey had come that morning when I was hanging out with him a little bit ago. He'd come that morning from talking to a number of parents and pet owners, interviewing them about like what has changed when they pulled their kids off of GMOs. And it was tear-jerking stuff. Like my kid we had to take him out of school because he had all these behavioral disorders and all sorts of like really aggressive types of symptomology that they were being medicated for and all this stuff. They pull the kid off the GMOs. He's fine, right? The pet is running around biting on people and all this stuff. They pull him off the GMOs. Pet's acting like a normal dog again, right? And it's story after story after story. And we'll share that stuff with you. We'll get Jeffrey to kind of get some of that footage over and share that in a subsequent webisode or whatever we do here. But take it from us, guys. This is real deal stuff. It's super easy to avoid. I want to reiterate the list here, okay? So it was corn, it was soy, it was canola. Where's my list? It was canola, it was alfalfa sprouts, and what was the sixth one? Lost it. Canola and safflower. So, guys, look for anything that has that in there and just don't buy it. And if you have it in your house, get rid of it. And you will be happy you did so. What we'd like to do is challenge you guys right now and say, all right, you've seen this. Take the Pepsi challenge here, right? Go off GMO. Let's do a GMO challenge, okay? Do it for 2 weeks, and then come into our comment threads wherever you see this video and let us know how it's going, what's going on, and then we'll engage back with you and we'll figure out how to help you through this. But I think you guys are going to be surprised about what's going to happen in your life in even 2 weeks of getting off this stuff. Okay?
That's right. And there's nothing more powerful than actually feeling this in your body. Pedram and I can talk to you about the things that we think are important for you and based on the evidence, what we think is important. But there's nothing like feeling this transformation that can happen in your body. So we really want you to take on this challenge. And after you've pulled GMOs out of your diet and you've seen these health benefits, share this video with 10 of your friends, because this is the message that we want to share. And we have to pressure our government to step up and do what's needed. There was a great analogy that a pediatrician gave yesterday. I was on the stage with Jeffrey and also a pediatrician and Ed Bauman, who's the founder of Bauman College. And this pediatrician was saying, why don't we take a look at the history of lead and what happened in the US? There was evidence that lead was bad, and Australia banned lead, Europe banned lead, like in I forget exactly when it was, 1915 or something like that. And then the US was so slow to ban lead. It was something like 1972. I mean, it was just outrageous how long it took us.
Wow.
So let's not let that happen when it comes to GMOs.
Look, you guys, paternalistic medicine is what's gotten us into trouble. Go ahead and eat all these Doritos and we'll come up with some diabetic medication that's going to get you out of it. We all now know that model doesn't work. Waiting for your government to fix your problems isn't going to work. Those guys can't even fix their own problems, right? And so really it's about taking things into your own hands, feeding your family the right stuff, taking care of yourselves, and doing it from the inside. So vitality kind of emerges from within. So what you need to do is establish a protocol for health and vitality in your own life. And as you start feeling better, what happens is people go, "Hey man, what's up with you, man? You look so good. What is that?" And then
did you have work done? That's what the girls say.
Oh my God, totally. You must have done something. You're lying, right? And
I love getting asked that. I'm like, healthy food, organic food, non-GMO.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just not being silly about what goes in my body, right? And so that's really the challenge, you guys, is just see what it feels like to feel better. And then, if you really are a glutton for punishment, 2 weeks later, go ahead and try some GMO food and tell us how you feel, right? it's once, and ideally you do that for 3 weeks, right? You just kind of let yourself, like an elimination provocation, you let yourself come off of this stuff. Then you take a little bit of GMO and see what your body does, and it'll punish you. And you'll be like, oh my God, I was eating this every day, so I was used to the poison. And so I'd have to have my afternoon coffee, or I'd have to take my, Advil every other day because the headaches wouldn't go away. And whatever it is that, however it manifested in your body, when you start pulling off this stuff, you start feeling better. It's like you start realizing how life can be. And it's pretty powerful.
Yes.
It's pretty powerful. Well, Sarah, I know you are going off to get some well-deserved R&R, and I want to wish you the best. I'm all sunned up, I'm all charged up and feeling good. So you need to go get yours. And so we'll see you, I guess, in a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. We'll start up the show again. We got a bunch of guests that we're lining up and all that. And so you guys, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, please share it, please like it and all that, so that we know that we're of service. And we're here for you. And give us story ideas if you think that there's stuff that you want us to talk about. We'll go after it because we're here to help be advocates for you. But again, let's step out of the talking head thing and get into empowering you. And you guys, I want you guys to doctor yourselves. We want you guys to feel good about what's happening in your own bodies and share that.
That's right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Dr. Pedram.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Good to see you. Enjoy your holiday, and we'll see you shortly thereafter.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.